Welcome to the Explainer. You know that feeling when you're trying to learn something new and it just won't stick? We've all been there. Well, today we're going to dive into the neuroscience of how we actually learn. We'll be using the incredible work of Barbara Oakley to show you how to unlock the hidden power inside your own brain. Yeah, let's talk about that feeling, that moment of just sheer frustration, right? You're staring at a problem, a new concept, and it just will not click. It feels like you've slammed into a mental brick wall. So frustrating. And you know what? That feeling of hitting a wall, that was Barbara Oakley's reality for years. Get this, she pretty much flunked her way through high school math and science. And yet, she went on to become a celebrated professor of engineering. How does that happen? Her journey proves something absolutely incredible. Our brains aren't fixed. We can literally change how we learn. Okay, so how is a transformation like that even possible? Well, it all comes down to this really core idea. Your brain has essentially two completely different modes of thinking, and the secret to mastering pretty much any subject is learning how to switch between them.
So here they are, side by side. On one hand, you've got the focus mode. Think of this as your intense concentration mode. It's when your prefrontal cortex is just firing on all cylinders, working on stuff you're already familiar with. But then, on the other hand, you have the diffuse mode. This is your brain's relaxed, big-picture state, where you can make all these new, creative connections. The catch? You can't be in both modes at the same time. The real trick is learning when to use each one.
Here's a great way to picture the focused mode. Imagine your brain is a pinball machine, but the bumpers are packed super tightly together. When a thought kicks off, boing, it just zips along these familiar, well-worn pathways. Now, this is perfect for, say, solving a math problem you already know the steps for, but it doesn't leave much room for new ideas to pop in, does it? But then you switch to the diffuse mode. Now, imagine that pinball machine, but the bumpers are spread way, way apart. Your thoughts can just roam free, bouncing around and making these wild, long-distance connections between ideas you would never link together in focused mode. This, right here, is where those aha moments are born. But remember, you can only get there when you let go and relax your focus. Okay, so we know that focused mode is crucial, right? It's where we do all the heavy lifting and learning. So how do we get past the single biggest obstacle to even getting started? I think you know what I'm talking about. Procrastination. And here's the wild thing. Procrastination, it isn't you being lazy. It's not a moral failing. It's actually a physiological response. I mean, studies have literally shown that when you even look at something you don't want to do, the pain centers in your brain light up. So, of course, your brain wants to stop that pain. And it does that by distracting you with something, anything more pleasant. But, and this is a big but, there's a super simple trick to bypass this whole pain response. It's called the Pomodoro Technique. It's so easy. You just set a timer for 25 minutes. Step 2, and this is crucial, turn off all the distractions. No phone, no tabs. Then you just focus as hard as you can on the task. And when that timer goes off, you reward yourself with a little break. See what's happening? You're not focusing on the painful task anymore, you're focusing on the time. It creates this great new habit loop, training your brain that a little burst of focus leads to a reward. Genius, right? All right, so you've put in your 25 minutes of focused work. Awesome. Now for the fun part. How do we intentionally switch over to that creative, problem-solving, diffuse mode? The one where all the big breakthroughs happen. You know, some of the greatest innovators in history were basically hacking this process for centuries. Take this surrealist painter, Salvador Dali. He would sit in a chair, totally relaxed, holding a heavy key in his hand. And just as he started to drift off to sleep, entering that diffuse mode, his hand would relax, the key would drop, and the clatter would jolt him awake. And in that moment, he'd capture all these bizarre, brilliant ideas that came straight from that in-between state. And it wasn't just artists doing this. The famous inventor Thomas Edison used a really similar trick, but with ball bearings. He was tapping into that exact same moment between being awake and being asleep to access his own diffuse thinking. The lesson for us is pretty clear. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs happen when you actually stop trying so hard and just let go. So let's say you did it. You switched between modes, you had that aha moment, you learned something new. That's fantastic. But how do you make sure it actually sticks? How do you stop it from just vanishing from your memory in a couple of days? Well, a huge part of the answer is sleep. And I don't just mean getting some rest. Sleep is an active and absolutely essential part of learning. In fact, neuroscience has recently uncovered something that is just incredible. While you're sleeping, your brain cells actually shrink. So why do they shrink? Well, this shrinking creates more space between the cells, and that allows fluid to literally wash through your brain, clearing out all the metabolic junk that builds up while you're awake. Think of it like a deep clean for your brain. It washes away the unimportant stuff and helps lock in the important memories. It's amazing.
And this is exactly why cramming for a test is one of the worst things you can do for learning. It's like trying to build a brick wall by just dumping all the bricks and a ton of wet mortar in a pile all at once. You just get a weak, jumbled mess that's gonna fall apart. Spaced repetition, though, is like building that wall the right way. You lay down a layer of bricks, you let the mortar set overnight while you sleep, then you add the next layer. You're giving your brain the time it needs to build strong, solid, long-lasting neuroconnections.
All right, now let's pull all these ideas together and see how they can completely flip our perspective on a really, really common piece of life advice. I'm sure we've all heard this a million times. Follow your passion. It's presented as the key to everything, right? The secret to a happy, successful life. But what if that advice is actually holding you back? So here's the big takeaway. Maybe better advice isn't to follow your passions, but to broaden them. See, passions aren't always something you just stumble upon. They're something you build. Think about it. A lot of the time, the things we end up loving the most are the things we had to work the hardest to get good at. Competence builds passion. So by choosing to learn new and difficult things, and now that you know the right techniques to do it, you're not just picking up new skills, you're opening yourself up to a much richer, more expansive life. So the only real question left is, now that you know how, what new skill are you gonna learn?